In a survey we conducted here at Astranti, we asked many different people what they felt were the most important reasons why individuals within their organization rose to the top. They rose to that chief financial officer position, they rose to that financial controller position. And there are a lot of different options, but over 2/3 of participants of the survey rated the pure management or the pure leadership skills of those individuals as being absolutely paramount to the reasons why they rose to the top. And since then, I've had people message asking me how they can work on those management or those leadership skills. And so what I'm going to do in this video is define the difference between a manager and a leader, because there is a difference. It's slight, but it is crucial. And you might be asking, well, even if there is a difference between a manager and a leader, what does it really matter? What does it matter whether you are a manager or a leader or not? You're still going to be in the same position at the company, etc. And also, how would I even be able to tell whether I was a manager or a leader or not? And also, again, what does it matter? Well, the reason why it matters is because if you can identify whether you are inherently a manager or inherently a leader, then you can work on those different skills. If you feel that you are a leader, but actually it turns out you're a manager, but you spend all your time trying to work on your leadership skills, perhaps you're not going to become a better manager when you should be looking to become a better manager because you are inherently a manager, and vice versa for leadership. And so what I'm going to do is go through a list of the key differences, key distinctions between the two, and explain the difference. And where I've got this information from is by looking at various different leadership journals and strategic management journals, etc., looking through all the different articles that have been written on management and leadership, and condensing that information and correlating some of the key points that have risen throughout that research. And I'm going to compare them side by side. But what I would say is, as we go through this list, it's going to look like leadership is good. It's something to aspire to, whereas being a manager is something that's a bit more old-fashioned, a bit passé, and something that people shouldn't really be aiming towards at this point in time. And that's actually what a lot of the academic research does suggest as well. It's very much pro-leadership, anti-management. But in reality, there is still just as much of a need for managers as there is for leadership. And if you can accept that you're a manager, or if you appreciate that you are a manager, there are lots of things you can work on to improve your management skills. And crucially, managers are just as important to organizations as leaders in the modern era. So what I would say here is, whilst literally it may look like being a leader is positive and being a manager is perhaps a bit less positive, that's only one way of thinking about it. There is actually a need for a lot of the skills that managers possess. So let's take a look at the two side by side. First thing, leaders focus on growth, whereas managers focus on tasks. And what I mean by this is, if you are a leader of a team, you are focused on that team growing, you are focused on the various different staff members within that team improving as individuals and employees, learning more skills. Whereas a manager is more focused on the results. They're focused on getting those staff to achieve results. So the manager is focusing on getting the job done. They're not focusing on developing staff. They're not focused on getting them to progress in their own careers, etc. They are focusing on getting the job done, achieving results. Whereas a leader would be more focused on the people themselves, focusing on developing them as individuals. Then the next key difference is that a leader will think broadly, whereas a manager will think incrementally. What I mean by this is that a leader will look at something and look at whether it could be done differently, whether the company as a whole is even operating in the industry it should be, whether it's operating in the fields that it should be, etc. Whereas a manager will think incrementally. They'll think, how can we improve our efficiency by 5%? How can we improve our profit margins by 5%, etc.? They're not looking to change anything as such. They're looking to keep things how they are, but work more effectively, to grow, to develop by very small incremental margins using the formula that has been used in the past. Another difference is that a leader will actively look to take risks. They'll look to try something that's never been done before. They'll look at the fact that it might go wrong and think, well, is it worth the risk? Whereas a manager will go out of their way to minimize risks, to keep there from risks arising, to make sure that everything stays on track, to make sure that nothing could go wrong. So less tends to go wrong for a manager compared to a leader, but a leader will often, when things go right, make a big difference, whereas a manager perhaps won't ever make a huge, substantial difference. They won't try anything new. But again, like I mentioned, that's not always a bad thing. If you just had leaders at running organizations and you just had people taking risks and just had people focusing on trying something new, nothing would actually ever get done. Because think about the organizations that you work for. If everyone was just trying to do something new all the time and taking lots of risks and thinking about where the company might be in 10 years' time, they'd never get there, because you also need people within organizations that keep things on track, that keep targets being hit. And that's another distinction between managers and leaders, is that managers will create a target. They'll create an achievable goal based on the pre-existing metrics within the organization. They'll create a profit target. They'll create a sales revenue target. Whereas leaders will create a vision. They're not so concerned with the specific financials. A leader will instead create an idea for what they want the company to be. They want the company to perhaps be a corporately responsible citizen. That will be the kind of thing that a leader will want. They want to create a device that makes the lives of people easier. That's the vision. Whereas the target will be to earn X amount in sales revenue. And the other key distinction between leaders and managers is that managers are generally quite rigid. They want to keep to the status quo. They want to keep with things that have been successful so far. If it isn't broke, why are we trying to fix it? And that can be both a positive or a negative. Again, it's positive because you don't want people messing with things. If things are very secure and they're working well, why do you want people changing that? It's also why managers are very useful in things like audit teams, where they're useful in financial teams, etc. Things where there are quite strict laws and regulations and things that need to be adhered to. Whereas leaders are more adaptable. They're willing to change their approach and to change their direction based on new information that they receive. And there are other distinctions between leaders and managers. In fact, if you were to look it up and go online, etc., you could find all manner of different lists of the difference and the distinctions between leaders and managers. But these were the ones that kept coming up in the different journals and the different articles that I was looking at. And again, as I mentioned, often it seems like being a leader is a very positive thing. A lot of these are quite positive, focusing on growing, taking risks, creating a vision, being adaptable, etc. Whereas the management one is more just focused on what we've always been doing. Let's not take risks. Let's meet these really hard, specific financial targets, etc. But as I'm sure you can imagine looking at this, there is a need for both within an organization. You couldn't have an organization that was run by nothing but managers, because there would be no new ideas made, no innovations. But at the same time, you couldn't have an organization that was nothing but leaders, because nothing would ever get done. You need managers to move people towards a target, whereas leaders create the vision and then managers help the staff within the organization achieve the vision of that leader. So where the differences between the academic researchers and myself differ is that I don't necessarily consider these traits of management to be a negative. They are very, very important to an organization. So what I would like you to do is to think about these traits here. Think about your own way of working and ask yourself which one you feel you are. Do you find yourself always trying to take new risks and thinking outside the box? Or are you someone that likes a very clear direction, someone that likes a nice framework to operate within? And again, there is no right or wrong answer here. The reason why I'm asking you is because it's important to identify which category you sit in. Because if you realize that you are perhaps a manager, or you realize that you are a leader, you've now identified the type that you are, and therefore you can start working on those management skills if you're a manager. You can start working on those leadership skills if you are a leader, which, as we've already established, is a really crucial part of getting promoted. Remember, 2/3 of people that answered the survey said that the pure management and leadership skills was one of the most important reasons why people got promoted. So do ask yourself these questions. Do you focus on growth, or do you focus on tasks? Do you take risks, or do you minimize risks, etc.? Or perhaps even a somewhat mixture of both. And once you've identified that, you then will be able to identify areas to improve. Okay, I'm a manager. Let's improve my management skills, etc. And in the next part of the video, I'm going to show you why it's so important to identify which one you are, but also I'm going to go into more detail of why each is so critical to an organization. So please do like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're going to be posting a lot of content over the coming months relating to management skills and leadership skills, and also communication skills, and all these things that are going to help you improve as an employee, help you improve as a prospective financial manager and prospective chief financial officer. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.